Good morning. We made it to Thursday with the full committee. It's good to see all of you here this morning. We have a guest with us from the Center for an Agricultural Economy. And Stan's going to be presenting to us for the early this morning, and what we'll do is introduce ourselves, and then we'll turn it over to you.
Morning, I'm Brian Collmore. I represent the Rutland District.
Irene Renner, the North, West Fairfax.
Brian Campion, Bennington County, Council Wilmington, and London Derek.
Rich Westman, Illinois.
Thank you.
And I'm Bobby Starr from Orleans. And so welcome, and you could tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'll then get right into the subject matter. And if there are questions from the members as you're going along, they'll just interrupt you or throw something at you, or we run kind of an informal meeting, but if we do have a question, we'll ask, and we'll go from there. So welcome.
Thank you.
Glad to have you.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Celine. I work at Center for an Agricultural Economy, which is in Hardwick. And I think our director, John, was here a little while ago talking to you guys. John Ramsey. Yep.
Yeah.
He's my boss. He's a good
Yeah.
boss.
Seems like a pretty bad, good guy.
He's a good guy. I appreciate having also a farmer who runs our organization. It's great. But so I do farm business planning at CAE, and I work almost exclusively with dairies, and mostly small dairies. And before I worked here, I worked actually in Lamoille County at for the conservation districts. I grew up in Elmore, and then when I moved back to Vermont about 5 years ago, that's where I started, because I'm a soil scientist. I've done a lot of dairy farming in New York and Vermont, and then moved back and just looking to stay in ag. So, but yeah, in my capacity now, I do business planning. So I work through the Farm and Forest Viability Program mostly. That's where like our big chunk of funding goes to do full plans with farms. But kind of in the relationships that I built in Lamoille County, working with mostly kind of small conventional farms, there's a lot of farms out there who it's not the right fit to do full business planning with, just because it's pretty involved. It takes a lot of time. And sometimes the product of a business plan isn't that useful to a farmer. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it isn't. And so in between work through the districts and then moving to CAE, I felt like there was a need for kind of like more of a light touch work with farms to kind of like engage with them, help make them aware of the programs that were available, because it seems like the same farms get the same help every time. And
so when you do a farm project, what's involved in
in a business planning project?
Yeah. That's like using too much electricity compared to a farm of their size using.
It can be
feed.
anything. I mean, for the real business planning process, like we start with kind of financials and getting everything out on the table. Like it's helpful to look at several years of data, which, that can take a year to get all the numbers out of the farm, and then we can start the planning process. But so we usually do start with the financials and start with kind of the low hanging fruit is what I call it. So on most farms that I work with, usually it's not the electricity bill, just because everyone kind of already has worked with Efficiency Vermont, but oftentimes it's like, how can we work on reducing the grain bill, or how can we work on reducing the amount of like young stock we're carrying, or like what are the things that they've missed.
Yeah.
And, oh, yeah,
I'd just say, God, I appreciate your light touch coming from an old farm family. Coming in and telling them what to do never worked.
no, no. Yeah, in my work, like 90% of what I do is building trust.
Relationship.
Yeah, and the other 10% is just helping people do what they don't have time for, if not teaching them what they don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it seems like, especially to bring, we have so many programs in Vermont for farms, but like I said, it does seem like the same ones get it over and over again, because they'll have someone who's like good at writing grants or good at just like being in there, or even like using a computer. Like that's a really big thing. I have a lot of clients who don't have a computer, and yeah. And in the past couple of years, like I've helped a couple clients work on working lands applications, and like have, worked with them, but like been the one submitting. And it's been, it's a little bit of an issue, because they'll be like, okay, what's the farmer's email? And I'm like, they don't have one. And they're like,
Is that because there's no broadband, or
it's
is
just,
it
well,
just
I
they
think,
haven't gotten into it yet?
I mean, I think it's part of it is also they just don't want it.
Oh.
Or they don't need it, or it's just not a part of their life. Like I work with one on-farm slaughterer who, like, he works at RK Miles in Morrisville, and then he has an on-farm slaughter business, and he has really no need for a computer. Like all of his requests are people call him, he schedules on his phone, like he doesn't need email. It's all word of mouth, and he's booked. So why would he buy a computer? And
So I'm just wondering, thanks, Mr. Chair. Is there a fund out there if a farmer did need a computer or wants to sort of do those kinds of things? Because we have them for other businesses. Could a farmer say, hey, I really want to move everything online or whatever? Does the agency have a fund, or is there a fund out there that could help a farmer in that regard?
I mean,
I don't know.
I'm not sure, but
Yeah, I was
I'm
just
not sure
curious,
if that
like
also
technological upgrades, if they want, I totally get it. Some people, my father never had a computer,
Well, I think
but-
like that might be a good question for some farmers out there, but I think maybe the step in between is potentially more support for like business planners or grant writers or anyone to provide a go-between. Like we
Okay.
don't necessarily have we'll have funding to help farmers submit grants, but there isn't as much of an understanding that like potentially it's the business planner who is doing all of that, because everyone assumes that like every farmer is like completely connected. So yeah, and it seems like there's a little bit more awareness of that, especially like in the far reaches and like kind of older farming families. They're not like, I don't think it would necessarily help them to have a computer, but it would help for kind of like the people who work with them to be funded to like help them actually just like submit things, like that kind of thing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's what I was gonna ask you. And don't get me wrong, I'm sympathetic. If I was born maybe 10 years on the other side, I probably wouldn't even have a cell phone. It's just, it seemed like I got along pretty well without it. But anyway, can you even get a grant without an email address? I mean, how would, if you weren't available to help these folks out, it sounds like some of them just wouldn't be able to do any grant writing or grant requests.
Don't even know they exist.
Yes,
Yeah.
that is very true. Yes,
Okay.
you cannot without an email. Like I have made kind of like a fake email before for a farm. Maybe I'm not supposed to tell you that, but
Already out there.
but I haven't. Yes, so that is.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of this disconnect where a lot of programs don't even have paper applications anymore.
Yeah.
It's like it has to be done through web grants.
Yeah.
And you have to have an email for it to be through web grants. And so like I can route that to my email sometimes, but the system definitely doesn't like several people going through one email. It's not really supposed to be that way. So it is a little bit of a disconnect. And yeah, if you don't, it's hard to hear about these programs sometimes unless you have kind of a reason, like people have a reason to have a service provider on their farm, which
Yeah.
a lot of them like maybe don't. But there are so many great programs this is gonna bring me back to my trajectory here. So there are, we got a little off topic, we're getting it back. But yeah, so there are just a lot of farms that don't necessarily know about all the programs.
Yeah.
So, okay, you can start.
Okay.
And you can just skip, I think, the first couple slides. Anyway, okay, yeah, skip to there. Okay, the farms one, that's it. So basically I found this kind of like area that I felt like hadn't been touched, which was just like, yeah, light touch work with a lot of small conventional farms, because they're a little bit out of the scope of kind of interest, I would say. There's not a lot of them left.
Yeah.
Oh, now you guys are really hooked on the screen. So basically I got some SARE funding and worked through my organization to work with like kind of all my small conventional clients. I have organic ones too, but there has been work done on cost of production on organic and grass-fed farms by like Sarah Flack, Jen Miller. So it felt like there was this kind of group of farms, small conventional, under 100 cows, that was a little bit forgotten. And a lot of those are the farms in like the far reaches of the state that don't have internet access, that don't have regular service providers showing up on their farm, that are somewhat just like forgotten, but are still plugging away, especially if they don't have a lot of debt. They exist, and the ones that are still there pretty much like have their shit together, because it's so hard to stay going as a small farm. Like there is no incentive to stay small in the organic or conventional market, but definitely in the conventional market. I mean, it's like DFA and it's Agrimark, and you get paid more when you make more milk, but now there's, you know, quotas, so you can't. So they're really stuck. So the ones that are still there have figured things out to make it work for themselves. And because if they hadn't, they would be gone. And so I found this group really interesting in that I wanted to be able to kind of like tell their story, get that light touch to them so that they would have access to more resources, but also kind of like generate conversations between those farms. Like I worked with a lot of them doing like nutrient management plans. And I remember talking to some of them about like the price they were getting, and one would be getting like $21.50, one would be getting like $17.85. And they, you know, there's no communication between that. And it's just about like components or the way they're managing their farm. But until you kind of like talk to another farmer who like also is milking 100 cows, also is in Lamoille County, you might not be realizing that financial, like that money that you're missing, because it's such an isolating industry. Like everyone's in their own island. And that's kind of the way that the co-ops like it. In a way, like in organic, you're not allowed to talk about your pay price.
I don't believe that. They're very transparent, you know, open.
No.
and-
No, wait, I know, no,
Farmers are-
you've got to read him, yeah, he's not.
Oh. Okay,
Talk
you're-
to Jay every day.
Okay. But like, I think it's.
We should
like
have a little
there's some-
sign behind him.
Just kidding.
As he's tough to read.
Okay, not okay.
Well, Have you ever tried reading a farmer's milk check?
Oh, I read them all the time.
Can you make them out pretty?
Well, at this point, I've looked at enough of them that I
So
kind
you
of
got it
understand what's going
figured
on.
out?
But like every month, there's a new thing on there that, I mean, this is what's so crappy about being a dairy farmer. Like every month, there's a new thing on there that's like, oh, $1.25 gone. Like,
Oh, yeah.
but like there's nothing you can do about it. And I think it like creates this sense of like insecurity and a little bit of shame. And so no one wants to talk about how much they're getting paid because it's scary. And so the part of this was to like get a lot of information together, kind of anonymize it so no one knows who's who, but then like be able to see like, oh, this person's like paying less for sawdust, or like has a higher milk price, but they're focused on like this breed or this type of production, or their somatic cell count is lower. Like that could maybe eke me out. I mean, when you look at milk quality, that's like thousands of dollars a year that can go down the tubes if you're not really paying attention to manage for that. So it's just like starting these conversations with farmers. So, okay. So the farms that I worked with were in Lamoille County, Caledonia, and Orleans, under 100 cows, shipping conventional, kind of all different management programs beyond that. But in that ballpark. Okay, you can go to the next one. Okay, this is just boring, but so go down to the next one. So basically I designed a template with Sarah Flack and Rose Wilson, other business planners in the state, to just kind of make it the best way so that it would gather everyone's information, but not like make it too granular, but also make it so that we could pull things out like bedding and things like that. And then I went to all the different farms, got all their kind of like financial data with them. And now I've been doing this for 3 years. So in the first year, it took like an hour to get that information. And then it would be like a couple phone calls to get it all. But now like I can call the farm and we can get all of that in a half hour or less. Cause like the farms that have been doing it, this is their 3rd year. And so it's really quick. And the first year I would also get information like how many cows you're milking, what breed, like how many acres, just kind of more general information too. Okay, you can go to the next one. I can send this stuff to you. I have like written.
We have it
It's
here.
on the,
Okay.
it's on here.
I have like a, okay, and so then I would bring back the information from the farms. I like, they would see their data, they would see their data compared to the average, and then they would see all the other farms that were like made anonymous. And then I would bring them a sheet, and I still do this, and this is kind of like that light touch business planning where it says like, okay, here are the areas where your farm is doing really well compared to your peers. Here are the areas where you could we could work on. And in this program, I did it through SARE, and I built in funding to like bring in a on-farm nutritionist that was an independent nutritionist, or bring in Sarah, or basically to kind of like be able to do a little bit of like get other eyes on your farm and try to think about those low-hanging fruit issues that like, okay, is there a way we could reduce your cost of production in like these little ways? But it mostly just like that kind of like bringing in a consultant, or that wasn't what kind of like made the farm be better. It was more just like that it started a dialogue like about their production system, or about changes they could make, or honestly, for me, it just created like now they know my number. And now they like will call me, and I can just like help connect them to who they need to be connected to. And it's just like a way to build a relationship through not necessarily like a program that's going to make you plant trees, or that you don't have time to do because like you can't make any money. But it's like, okay, let's look at the finances, which is really what you care about before anything else. Because like, how can you care about like your riparian area if you can't pay your bills? So it was like a good way to just like communicate with farmers and talk about what was important to them, and then like start a dialogue, but also communicate their story. Okay, next. This is all too tiny. Okay, so these, we'll just look at this really quick, but basically what I wanted to show you was the price received. So this is for 2020, and now have 2021 data too, but I just didn't, well, it's later on in the slides. But so this is for 2020, so it's obviously going to be a little different every year. But I wanted to show you the average price they received in 2020, which was $18.51, and then the cost of production, which for me, I include, so you can see that 2044 number is just their fixed and variable expenses. So just like, you know, kind of everything that's running the farm.
No labor.
It does have labor, but most of them have it doesn't include labor if, like for most of these farms, they actually don't hire labor, and their labor is all their own. So this is not really including labor.
Yeah.
So especially that number, that 2337 number, so that'll include their debt service basically, or depreciation. I kind of like made up a proxy that you're either, if you don't have high debt service, I assign like $10,000 per 50 cows to account for depreciation, because depreciation is a huge cost on these farms. It's like, they can look like they're breaking even, but that's why there's all these farms that look like hell, because all their assets are depreciating before our eyes. It's a real cost. So I include that in all my cost of production work, like a big chunk for kind of like capital reserve for depreciation. So yeah, that number of 2337 as opposed to the 1851, that's just kind of showing you like that's what it is costing. And there's some farms that are making 100 pounds of milk for $18. And that's important to know too. Like it is a range. Like we've got an 1898, that was the lowest farm that I worked with. So there is a range, but at the end of the day, it is like not enough essentially. And so that's just kind of, I mean, and like it says there, like $21,000 is the deficit between that, like the received and the paid. And 2020 was a weird year. There was a lot of COVID money and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, it's kind of looks like this every year. Like this year, it looks kind of worse because inputs went up. Last year, or for 2022, it's kind of crazy how much cost production went up just because of diesel. Like diesel was insane last summer during cropping
Feed.
and grain. So it's kind of the same story every year. There's a deficit and people are making up for it in kind of different enterprises or off-farm jobs or the depreciation of all their assets. But it's coming from somewhere. Yep.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is a really interesting to me because the larger farms probably are in a position where they already have someone else that can do business planning for them. I'm sure very few of them don't have like lots of computers. If I'm reading this right, your job, and I appreciate, and I think your work with the conservation districts probably set you up pretty well with this, because as Richie mentioned, or Senator Westman, when they come on a farm, people are happy to see them. They know they're going to get some genuine help. And so anyway, if I'm reading this right, in essence, your job is to get that $21,230 deficit reduced as much as you possibly can and help that farmer get back to more of an even keel.
Well, yes, that would be great if I could do that. I don't think, first of all, I don't think the point of this project is to just help people make cheaper milk. It's also to just show that it is almost impossible to make cheap milk on a small farm because you're carrying the same fixed expenses and, you know, a lot of the same other expenses as a larger farm that's just like making more milk. So that gets diluted over like however many more hundredweights. So yes, in my work with farms, my goal is to help them be profitable, which means like reducing that number. But it's also like in this work, it's kind of just trying to tell a story. Like everybody knows small farms are struggling, but for me, data is more compelling than like an anecdote. And like it's almost impossible to be small right now, just the way that things are going. There's no reason or incentive to be small.
Do you make suggestions about what they should move from, you think they should move to?
Yeah, we can go to the next slide.
The one thing you haven't got up there on that cost stuff is we've done a 2-year deal studying dairy ag. And one issue that we drilled down pretty deep on, had some good research, is meeting Vermont. See, we're competing with other farmers from the Northeast for our markets.
Yeah.
And so, but we in Vermont have a lot different environmental laws than New York or Mass or New Hampshire. And the projected or the costs for meeting these additional environmental standards, it came back to us at $1.76 a hundredweight.
Yeah, gosh.
So, you know, that somewhere along that line, that's got to be deducted out.
Well, that might kind of be built into some of this in that like I'm guessing a lot of those are from, okay, you create a buffer, that's X amount less of acres of corn that you're able to grow in that same field that you're putting the same inputs in. So it might kind of already be coming out of that in that it's increasing their cost of production.
So some of it would be.
Some of it probably would be unless they're doing like extra things on top, but all their expenses are in here. They are all built in. So if I see, most of that, there aren't numbers that I'm leaving out of this. So it should kind of be built in, but that is probably one of the things that does make it higher in Vermont. And I agree, it's tough to be a small farm and you don't get getaway free cards if you're only milking 25 cows. It's almost like you get more attention.
The other issue, what we've heard from many of our small farms is that either the spouse or the, one of them works off the farm.
Yeah.
So they can get health insurance and, you know, have a couple of dollars to eat with it at the end of the week. Are you finding that when you visit farms?
Yeah, it's definitely a mix. Like I have one client who I've worked with for basically three years now, and this year they're kind of making the change to like, he's gonna start doing some trucking because they just like need the income, and they're gonna start doing like a little less of their own cropping. And like buying a little more feed just because they kind of need to try and make it work in a different way. It doesn't mean that they don't need him on the farm because they really do. But yeah, to just bring in that income, it's so much easier to just like go get a job, even if it's a low paying job, than to work on a farm because you really don't get paid. So even if you're making like $15 an hour, that's all like net income, which is a lot more than no or negative. But it's just, you know, it's just crummy because we want to see these farms be better managed, and that's how they can also reduce their costs and like create an environment for like the next generation to want to be in. Like a farm that has a team is a lot more fun to work on and a lot more effective than a farm that is just like one person or even a couple. Like if you make enough money to hire even one more person onto your farm, it changes the dynamic. Like it's fun. Like these big farms, like, I mean, I love big farms, and they are so like when you're in that, like when you're in cropping season, like on a 500 cow dairy, and like there's trucks moving and like there's corn being chopped, and it's just like, it's fun. And a lot of these small farms, like they don't get that kind of like the fun out of it as much just because you can't afford to hire anybody. Like if they could, they would, you know. But anyway, so here, I mean, I don't know if we can talk about all this, but as you know, grain is really expensive. So that's the number one cost on these farms. And then the fixed ones are next. So that's the fixed expenses being so high. That's kind of like why bigger farms are more profitable. Just because those fixed expenses, like keeping the lights on, paying your farm insurance, they're, you know, in proportion to the amount of money you make, it shrinks so much. And it's just like farms in Vermont, like you still have to have the same amount of equipment. Like not everybody can share like a chopper or a tedder because everyone's using them at the same time. So everyone's carrying so much equipment, so much stuff. And if you're milking 50 cows or you're milking 150 cows, it's probably a similar equipment base. So it's just more expensive to run it if you're small. Yeah, but okay, next one. Actually, you can kind of skip the next one and then I'll
Go past that?
yeah, go past that. That one's just fixed expenses. So here are some of the leverage points that like I work with farms on. So ration changes, forage management to get more dry matter intake from pasture, so it's not harvested. Water access is huge and definitely like not totally utilized on every farm. Yeah, you guys can look through these, but there's all sorts of leverage points that we can work with. But another huge one is hauling. So I don't know if you guys are aware, but if you're organic, you don't pay hauling. And so that's one of the things that makes it easier to be a small organic farm. So their pay price is higher, but also their grain costs a lot more. So that in a way that kind of evens out a little bit to be organic, but you don't pay hauling. And that's the thing that helps, because so on a farm that's milking 100 cows, they pay about 20 grand in hauling every year. That's a lot of money.
Well, it's the wages that they don't pay.
Yeah. And so that's one of these big things about like small organic versus small conventional. Small organic, it's not paying the hauling, and that does help them a lot, even though they're like right now they're struggling a lot and their price is not high enough. Obviously, you guys know all this. But it is helpful, and hauling is this big thing that really hits small farms. And especially because they some of them still have small bulk tanks, so they're getting picked up every day. And I mean, I worked with 7 farms on that, or 8 farms on that DBIC milk storage grant, all like conventional and organic. None of them got it.
They didn't?
No, like I don't know who got it, but not like any of the farms I worked with. And I mean, I helped a lot of folks with that. And there's like another organic one going now, which is great. But at the same time, organic doesn't pay hauling. So they're not getting dinged for that extra stop charge every day. Whereas conventional folks are. And so I do feel like that program, of all the DBIC programs, that was one of the most useful, just because everyone needs like infrastructure and stuff. And yes, I know it doesn't pay for construction, which is very annoying, but like, yes, people can use a new bulk tank if they're getting picked up every day, or a lot of people need like a new condensing unit. Like these are things that are needed on farms. I was super excited about that, but it didn't have that much funding in comparison to a lot of the other DBIC programs. And I would say like, if there could be another round of that for conventional, or another round of that for small, or it was actually useful, or it would have been had people gotten it. I don't really know the farms that got that grant, because I didn't work with any of them. And I was like, I've been talking to milkmen too, and they're like, we don't know anybody who got it. Or like Pete Greaves, who like does all this
Yeah, I know.
installation work, or like Lions Dairy had to put out so many quotes for this grant, so that they could like put the budget in it. And like the Lions guy was like, I don't know anybody who got it. So I'm not really sure where it went, but it was a small pot of money and a lot of people applied.
Yeah, what do we have in there, Rich? 300.
Yeah, I think that's,
350,000?
it was not that much.
Right. And it was like, I think a lot of people got excited about it, so a lot of people applied, but again, it's like, it's a long application. And like, you have to get all the quotes together for it and everything, and it was a bit of a bummer.
See, in the way we anticipated that, there's a percentage the farmer had to cover,
Right.
but we figured that would be in kind.
Oh, yeah, or I
No.
mean, everyone was even happy to
I
pay that
mean,
like in cash. I mean,
But
if,
what I like about it is you're doing stuff that will save them money
Structural
going
too. Bigger bulk
structural
tanks.
into the future. So you're helping them out of their hole
Oh, yeah.
going forward, which
yeah, because that's the biggest thing. It's like, I know there's a lot of crap running around about how dairy gets so much help, but if folks could afford to like have that bigger bulk tank, or to put in loose housing in a parlor, they would. Like, they all want, it's not like they're just like waiting for money to rain down on the sky from the sky. It's like, if they could make their business more profitable with infrastructure upgrades, they would. It's just like, you can't, because there's no money. Like it's just like, everyone wants to run a profitable business and to put money into their business, I would say, like on any farm I work at, but it's just like the capital isn't there. And I think there is a lot to be leveraged in that, like a lot of farms need infrastructure upgrades. Like so many farms are going to need to put in parlors and loose housing in the next, 5 to 10 years. It's going to be required.
One of your farmers got a thing.
No, and I have 3 organic clients too. So they're all reapplying.
so you had 8
Yeah,
that you
Plus the
worked with,
3?
and none of them.
none of them.
Eight
And
plus?
I was like writing that application for some of them. So I know they were good.
Or
And I mean, every week they send out upgrades and they've got this much and this much. I mean, they've got more money in there they can spend.
I know, but like, okay, so this last one, the innovation one, like the dairy farm innovation one, I think I worked with 3 clients who are applying for that one. And I don't even know if they're gonna get it, because in communication with, like, I had farms be like, okay, we could really use update. We either need like cow collars, or like we want to switch to a robot, or we are looking to get an ag bagger so that we can have like a more efficient way to put up feed, like all things that are like technology upgrades to make their farm more profitable. But I would talk to Laura about some of these ideas, and she's like, well, people are already doing that. That's not really innovative. And so I'm kind of like, wait, you want these dairy farms to think of something totally new? Like,
How do you know it's gonna work?
how do you know it's gonna work? I mean, and so I appreciate that program so much, but like in that last one, it's a complicated application. And like, it's just kind of like, I want farmers to be able to invest in things they know are gonna work. Like an ag bagger, yeah, they've been around, but they're like $100,000. So not a lot of people have them, but they totally increase your profitability because you're able to you don't waste nearly as much feed. You could put up like a snaplets
Better
corn crop,
feed.
better feed, like drier, like a slower fermentation, everything about that way of putting up feed can be better for farmers. And a lot of folks know that, they just can't shell out $100,000. So it's like that, in my mind, is a way for like an injection of cash to move a farm forward in a way that they couldn't necessarily on their own. But it's not like innovation because it's been done. And it's tough. I know we don't just want to like give things out willy-nilly, but I do also feel like there are a lot of technologies out there that could help a lot of farms. They're just not accessible because of the capital. You know, it's the same like with a milking parlor. Like we know that can like is better on the body of the farmer. It's better for the like often for the cows. Like tie stalls are going, you know, they're gonna be gone.
Sure.
But to put in a parlor and lose housing, I mean, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's
Has to
huge.
be.
It's
Has to be.
huge. And that's like what's coming down the pike. Like we, you know, like tie stall barns are not gonna work for our next generation.
Do you
But-
have any left that you work with, I stall?
Oh, yeah.
Is that or?
Well, I work with little farms.
And still, most of the little firms have tie stall.
Yes, yeah, a lot of them do. But a lot of that is because you can't cash flow a parlor on 50 cows.
Right.
Like
Wow.
they would if they could. And when you're milking more, it's easier to have that. Even if you're not making more money, the amount of money that moves through a larger farm can like work that debt service. Like even if like at the end of the year, you're not making the money. I mean, your milk check is like 35 grand every, you know,
So the,
every 2 weeks. So you can cash flow debt much easier if you're bigger.
Yeah.
Which,
so basically what you're saying is when the organic companies all say you have to have freestall, what they're really doing is pushing all of small firms out the door because there's no way for them to become to cash flow to get to that place.
right, yes. That's
But if you have
exactly right.
a chain and a collar, they're accepting them. It's the tie stall stanchions.
Yeah.
Really.
But I think that also an issue with that is that I've come to with farms working in tie stalls is that it's really hard to get employees or like milking relief when you're in a tie stall because it's a more complicated milking process. It's harder on your body and it's just a lot more difficult to get help or to even get like migrant labor or anything. When you have a tie stall, your operation it's kind of more suited for the operator to run it than for an employee. Right. So it's like, as we look at like, okay, is this farm's children going to take over and run their farm? They're going to be much more apt to do that if that farm has a parlor or a robot, than if it's still a tie stall, because it's too hard of work. Like milking takes too long. It's too hard on your body. Like everyone's got their knees replaced if they've been milking in a tie stall their whole life or needs to. It's just like, it's the way things are moving. Like there's too much like kind of financial stress to keep these systems that are not as efficient, essentially. Like it used to work when the costs were more covered, but now that they're not, like there's too much stress for there to also be that amount of stress on your body, I think. So yeah, in essence, as we move forward to everyone kind of needing to adapt to these new ways of farming, the small ones are going to be left out because they don't have that extra money to invest, but also because they're not getting paid enough for their product.
And,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
I was just gonna ask, have you had any of the farms that you've been working with convert over to, root crops or anything else to help their income?
Like diversify. I hate that word, but I would say,
Why?
well, because I feel like a dairy farmer already has a very diversified skill set, like.
Yeah,
they're
oh, I
mechan-
see what you mean.
Like
It's
they're
like a
mechanics.
criticism, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like
Yeah.
they're growing crops, they're
Yeah.
also mechanics, they're also like milking cows, they're also feeding cows, which
Yeah.
is like a whole nother, like people have like whole
They're
lifetimes
already
and
busy.
careers
Yeah,
about
they're
one
already
of these
diverse, yeah,
things.
yeah.
And so, yeah, so that's why I just.
Yeah,
like,
no,
have
I was
a
just
thing
curious,
about that.
yeah.
But no, I would say at the end of the day, it's like, it's such a squeeze that I think it's hard to want to try something totally new. And so in my experience, I feel like I haven't necessarily had folks that are growing new crops.
Like
Um,
cannabis or-
Oh, I mean, I guess I did see that, but it was a little bit of a tough situation. Kind of created more debt than good things for a lot of
They
folks.
can't grow cannabis. They can't grow cannabis because if it's over 1,000 square
No,
feet,
that-
they'd have to take that land out of current use. And most of them couldn't afford the taxes to take it out of current use.
Yeah,
Well, I think cannabis, to really, a farmer to get in it, they gotta be that 1,000 square feet.
Well, then, you can't go over 1,000 square feet. You've got to,
You got 600 plants and,
I mean, I would kind of also say though, for an investment like that, like a lot of the farms that went into like hemp, like 3 or 4 years ago, like they're all of a certain scale, mostly because like to cash flow or even to get financing for that investment, you have to have a certain size farm. So anyone, I mean, I don't really know of a farm milking 100 cows that went into hemp, basically because like they couldn't. It was an expensive industry to get into. Like you had to take on a lot of debt to do it. So you kind of already had to have that relationship with a lender, which is like kind of all the larger farms to begin with. But yeah, I would say like the folks that are kind of still hanging on, I feel like I do have clients that are like, okay, what about a new enterprise? Or like, what if we made cheese? Or it's just, first of all, value-added dairy hasn't necessarily shown that it is like so profitable in our state. And I think that's a hard thing. Like it's really pushed, but like I work with a lot of business planners who work with value-added dairy producers, and it's not cash flowing that much better. It's just like maybe you've
handling.
added, like more, but it's not like making the money I think everyone thinks it is. Same with goats. It's like the cost that they're, like the price that they're getting paid for that milk, it has been kind of the same since I started working in the industry, and it's like one buyer. Why do we think that that's gonna have a different outcome than like having 2 buyers for all of our other milk?
Well, I've been in the transportation business. I didn't make any money with 1 truck, so I bought 2. I wasn't making any money with 2, so I went and doubled it and got 4. And got pretty soon, I had 30 and still wasn't making. No, I'm just kidding.
So can I go back just for a second to the, and you don't have to tell us the number, but let's say it's somewhere around 8, 10, 11 farms that applied for that money. What's the process? Do they get told that they didn't get it? Is there a reason why they didn't get it so they know, or do they just never hear again and assume they didn't?
Yeah, they get back and they'll get some feedback.
Okay.
Yeah, they'll get some feedback on their application that we'll look at, but then you can't really do much with it because they can't really like apply again, or the organic folks can, so they're able to use their first application to edit their second. Because there's that second round going right now for organic milk storage, but the conventional ones, yes, they hear back and they get feedback on their application. That's how it works.
Yeah.
Okay, we can scoot down. Oh yeah, okay, so now you can see, so this is some of the 2021 data. So you can, basically this is just to show you how expenses, so people got paid more money in 2021 for their milk, just like they got paid more money in 2022 for their milk. 2022 was a great year, but expenses also dramatically increased.
Yeah.
So we're seeing like this year, I'm just starting to get 2022 numbers from farmers, and they were getting paid a lot more for milk, but like I said, input costs went way up. So we're just still, the issue is kind of still the same in that scale, like the issue of scale in dairy is not going away, no matter how many grant programs we have, which like they can be helpful. I wish more of them would pay for concrete and construction. They can be helpful, but at the end of the day, if you're still getting paid below your cost of production, there's no program that is going to help you. So I guess that's kind of like what I want to talk to all of you about, is just like, how can we incentivize farms to keep small, to stay small? Like, what are the funding sources that can be leveraged? Like, in what I see currently as one of the only funding sources that could be leveraged is that DMC funding, in that it could be scaled.
DMC. Well, we do, we do cover that, or we have
Yeah,
covered the premium.
right, but what I mean by a way to make that more helpful to small folks is basically like how it works now is how the rest of the industry works. The more milk you make, the more DMC money you're going to get, right? Because,
Well, except for we cap it out.
well, there's two, it's
5
scaled at 2, yeah, so it has 2 chunks right now,
Small, medium.
but we could have more chunks. If like, so right now it's, yeah, I think it's scaled at 5 million pounds. If it was scaled at 1 million pounds, that would essentially help more. So say it was scaled at 1 million pounds, 2.5 million pounds, 5 million pounds. Basically, you're able to get more of that funding proportional to the amount of milk you make if you're smaller. Like 1 million pounds is the real helpful scale. If we're talking about like real small farms, 5 million pounds of milk is basically 5 times more than any one of these guys is making with 100 cows. Like maybe some of them are making 1.2 million pounds. So if we're looking at like, okay, a small farm that kind of suffers in this commodity industry is basically like milking 50 cows, even milking 100 cows, even milking 150 cows. Like, what are ways that we can support this group? It's probably not to scale at 5 million, it's to scale at 1 million and then 2.5 million.
What,
Kind of how Maine does it.
and to see it, it's all based on the difference between the price paid
Mhm.
to the farmer and the feed costs. And I don't know how you would rig it up so that it would pay more. I mean, it already is like a small farm and a medium farm up to about, was it 400 cows or 350? They all get covered all the way through all of their production. The big guys, they get a month's worth of
Mhm.
production help, and, they hit that cap.
Right. Well, yeah, I think all I'm saying is like, I think that's kind of good because I have nothing against large farms at all.
Oh, no.
It's just that it's
large.
an industry more suited to larger farms because the more milk you make, the more money you make,
Well,
essentially.
supposedly.
Well, but I mean, like, if you think about the commodity market, it's kind of like, that's kind of the way it works. It's like, we make as much as we can, it goes into the market, that changes the price. Like, it's not necessarily, that's just like how dairy works. And now people, like, there are quotas and everything like that now, which has changed it. But, there's not necessarily, why would you there's no incentive to stay small because you're only going to make more money if you get bigger.
No, you're only gonna break even
Right,
if you get larger.
right, yeah.
We're not talking about anybody getting rich in this.
No.
I'm just,
Yeah.
The other piece I would say is what is interesting about what you talk about is a lot of the programs and reason that the general public in Vermont wants to help farmers is because we have this nostalgic view of cows on the hillside and the small farm and the larger farms with 1,000 cows in a barn. You know, there's a lot, always this criticism, whether it's just perceived or, well, they're polluting or something like that. So there's this anti. But the small farm is what is, people want to help and want to see the cows on the hillside, and they're going out. So the question is, how do we mesh what people want to help with where it is, and how could you do that?
Yeah, I think that's the question. And I think there is nothing wrong with a large farm at all. I think I just see a lot of benefits of being able to hold on to small farms that other states haven't been able to. Like first of all, like, yes, there's a landscape aspect to it. Like, it's not just cows on hillsides. It's like basically keeping land open in more rural places in Vermont. If that's like in hayfields and pasture, like large scale agriculture is not suited for hill farms in Vermont. So there's part of it that's like, it's visual. I think we like to keep our land open. We like for it to be active and useful and kind of making money. But I would also say there's like a societal and economic piece of keeping more of these small farms around, and that if there's more of them, then, I mean, as we lose them, we also lose the industries that make them able to run. So like feed companies, like harvest equipment, like Lions Dairy, like IBA, all of those can only exist because there's a certain amount of farms they can service. And as we lose more and more of these small ones and they kind of get consolidated, I just see us losing that kind of like rural economic charge. And also like a community aspect, like, I think it's important for, like, I see small farm families building communities around them, and I think it's a really great thing. And I think all scales of agriculture do that, like large or small, but I think the more kind of like units we can have, it feels better for our community and for our economy and kind of like for, I think, what we want to see.
So if I'm understanding, the 1 million cap would sort of be a sweet spot for the smaller group. In other words, you got the same amount, the same pot of money, but at some point you say, if you go over 1 million,
Yeah.
you can't get, it would change the proportion, I think, of those that are being able to take advantage of it.
Right, and in Maine, the way that they have kind of created a very successful milk pricing scheme in Maine, which we couldn't necessarily do here because the way that I understand it, we don't consume enough of our own dairy to be able to leverage the funds that we make off the dairy. So that's how Maine has done it. Like, they consume enough of their own dairy that they can put that money back in, and it is scaled. So if you are, I don't know if they do it based on pounds produced or cows, but basically you make more per hundredweight, you get more of that back.
Yeah.
If you're smaller than if you're bigger.
That's called an over-order state price. And that 2-year deal that I told you about, we worked on, came up with the environmental costs. Well, we designed one of those systems because about 65 to 70% of our milk stays home. And so we went through the whole process in 2 years of it. And so we get near the end and we have farmers interview and to get them on board. And one behind the other, well, we're very, now these are people that like you've worked with, they're hanging on with their fingernails. Well, you know, it's a great plan that you've got. But won't that cost our co-ops some money? And, you know, we don't wanna hurt our co-ops. We've gotta keep our co-ops strong and healthy. And it kind of,
Well, it's better
I
to
mean,
have
I've
some
spent
market than
40
no market. Is that
40
basically what they're saying?
years working with farmers, trying to get them a fair price. Got them the dairy compact. We did that right here in Vermont. And my phone stopped ringing, but the big guys in DC killed that.
Mhm.
So now we're trying to figure out this, because they said, well, what we need to do in Vermont is to have a robust, products that we make right here at home. Stop shipping all that milk to Boston. Because we used to keep 15% home and 85% went elsewhere. Well, now we're keeping the bulk of that home. Ben and Jerry's, Cabot Cheese, Jasper Hills, the yogurt plant in Brattleboro. They're buying all this local high value, high protein milk that's produced here. But the money that they all make never trickles down to the farm. And so this over a third, the state over order price would assess a little bit on each of those to bring that money home and divide it up. But the farmers we had in, well, you know, we don't want to hurt our co-op. Well, who's taking,
Right.
where's all the money going that somebody's making on the ice cream and the cheese and the yogurt?
Yeah.
And I mean, where's that money all going?
Yeah, I mean, I work with, with some of this cost of production work, like I've worked with all the 3 farms that ship to Jasper Hill. And
Yeah, how they do.
well, the thing is, it's like, I think when you're comparing dairy farm profitability with business profitability, you're comparing apples to oranges, because in a business, everyone is getting paid a salary. So like everyone at Jasper Hill, like if you're moving cheese, if you're working in the office, like they're all getting paid.
Yeah.
So when their business doesn't make money, everyone's still getting paid. Even if the business isn't making a profit that would go back to those shareholders. So we'll talk about like business profitability, and we'll say like, we can't increase our milk price. Our business is not making money. But that's really different than a dairy farm not making money, because they're not getting paid for their labor. You see what I mean? Like, I think there's this really big
except for,
disconnect with business.
Mateus said that they pay like $40 a hundredweight.
That's not true, first of all.
They don't.
No. I mean, I don't know if I'm gonna get in trouble for this, but it's, no, I mean, I worked on the cost of production for those farms, and I was like, okay, if you paid $32, everyone would be like, there'd be gravy, but more, like if you want to do dry hay, like it's gotta be more. We're looking at like $35, $40. And I mean, no, it's like a battle, and it was a battle, and it's really frustrating because these farms are losing money.
So do they buy that milk direct from the farmer, or do they buy it from the co-op that the farmer
Yeah, from the
is
co-op.
hooked up with?
From the co-op. So so the farmer still pays for like the hauling and for the charges that are like taken out of the milk, even though that co-op is not getting their milk. And then they'll get paid like a bonus. Like, so say the co-op is paying like $22 and Jasper Hill's paying $25. The farmer will get the $22 from the co-op, and then Jasper Hill will give them $3 to make up for the difference, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because they aren't steady on their purchase.
No, it's very,
Depends on-
yeah, it depends on production, like, depends on the time of year. But like, just that to say, like, I feel like everyone is a little hamstrung in the dairy industry, but it is really different to compare like a business where every employee is getting a wage to a dairy farm where no one is getting a wage. And I think that's where like profitability, it's like, you're not really talking about the same thing. And I think that's something that gets lost with like our milk buyers or the co-ops where they're like, we can't pay anymore. But you're like, but everyone's like getting a paycheck.
Well, they have to pay a certain amount
Yeah.
because that feds do that, but what the feds set is a minimum price. But it's always been the going price. You know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we
Sorry.
gotta, so anyways, we'll look into the grant issue.
Yeah, more
Well-
infrastructure grants.
We'll keep talking, in regards to the thinking about how we could figure out a way to get a higher price to the smaller producers. And I don't know, anything else that,
No, it gave us a lot to think about.
Yeah.
yeah, it was
having me.
really good, to have you come in.
Yeah, I'll come anytime.
And,
Andy Gilliard still around up in Hardwood? And Louis, they used to have certain veggies. I don't know if they're still
Oh.
doing it.
Yeah, I think they're friends. So
Oh,
it's
that's-
definitely like getting smaller. than
Smaller,
this.
yeah.
Yeah.
Just curious. Thanks.
Well,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thanks so
Thank you
much.
very much. Say hi to Joan.
I will.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Okay.
I'm in the bathroom.
You leaving for the day? or-
so anyhow. You look for me?
Yeah, just say yes to that.
So anyways, that was interesting.
Sure was.
It's good to.
I mean, at least you can read a milk check. Can you read a milk check? You can. Someday I'm gonna have you come in and do a class. Do a class for us because I've looked at one and I haven't been able to figure out.
They're very different from each co-op. When we had the dairy grants with COVID and we had to review them, we were trying to train people how to read them and it was very complicated because they all look very differently.
Well, I mean, if I sent my folks a paycheck and I had it so they couldn't figure out how that I got to the bottom line on it, they'd probably say, come in and say, Bobby, how come, there ain't fun and games going on with all this much taken out and that much for this and this much for that. And I mean, I don't know. I guess that's why I never actually earned a dime from milking cattle.
Or if you did, you didn't understand where.
Reading your power
No,
bill.
I never did it
Okay.
because I watched my folks and I said I can figure out a freaking better way to make a buck
There you go.
than this. And, so anyways, Evie, thanks for coming. Steve, we were wondering a little overview on the milk bonding stuff. Do we still do that? And so could you give us a little overview and I don't, do you folks, committee, do you understand milk bonding?
No, I don't know what that is.
Okay, so you wanna,
Happy to talk about
You wanna, start kind of quickly at the
Yeah.
beginning and
Yep. So for the record, I'm Evie Flory, the Dairy Section Chief at the Agency of Agriculture and our Food Safety Consumer Protection Division Director. An in-state statute as a way to protect our dairy farmers who are shipping lots of milk. And a lot of it is handled by their co-op that goes to an end user to make it into product. And so that end user either pays the farmer directly. For most people, they pay the co-op and that goes to their milk check. And so in Vermont, we have in state statute a provision that requires these processors to hold a bond or a letter of credit. And it's something that we calculate each year when we do our licensing. These processors have to submit how much milk they purchased the previous year. And then in statute, it says that we have to determine 41 days worth of money based on the highest month of Vermont milk that they either purchased or the highest dollar amount. So there's a lot of calculating we do in my office to get that equation correctly. We inform the buyers of the milk what their bond or letter of credit needs to be. And we hold that yearly. So if a company went bankrupt or defaulted, we would have money, we would be able to issue that letter of credit and get the money to the farmers. Because dairy farmers, they don't know their milk price. I'm sure Bobby, you know painfully about this. They don't know what their actual price is until basically the following month when it gets set by the milk market order. And so the intention is they wouldn't know, they wouldn't see financially their check not coming basically until the following month. So the bond is to have that there. So if something happened and like there was a default, that the state could take that bond to the bank and issue it to get the money to the farmers. So.
catch up.
Yeah, I don't know what the 41-day magic window
That was
is.
something
What-
from the
what is that?
legislature. I think the 41 days, it was because we're looking at previous year, like what the highest like dollar amount was they bought for a month in the year. And so I think they put the 41 days in there to make sure that enough money was in the calculation for the current year. So that there would be enough money to be able to cover the milk that was purchased. But I don't know how the legislature came up with 41 days, but
Well,
that's what
that,
they came up with.
that's the way it works through the process. Like the money goes, the milk goes from the farm to a distributor
Right,
where they commingle it.
Right.
And then it gets sold to somebody that puts it in a bottle or into a product.
Okay.
And then it goes to the store.
okay, so that
And-
process might take.
And then the store has to sell that.
Okay,
And by the time the money gets from you and I and other consumers
okay,
back around to the original commingler and to the farm, it takes 41 days. So,
all right, so it's an actual,
so it isn't
it is
like
based on something.
I start making cheese and I order a tanker load of milk from whoever. And when they drive in the yard, I pay them for it. You know, I have 41 days to get my money. So it's all, I mean,
Okay, so
When
it's
you,
kind of real time.
when you quit farming, your first 6 weeks, you don't get paid.
yeah,
And then at the end, when you go out of farming, it's 6 weeks, you know, so your check is always based on 6 weeks.
Thank you.
and you didn't explain about the co-ops.
So the co-ops are exempt from this.
Our two main, we have two main.
Right, I know that. Yeah,
Um,
thanks.
And so the co-ops that are farmer owned and they have representation on the board and everything, they are not required to have a bond because the farmers are members of that. So you're strictly looking at a processor that is buying this, that has to have the bonds.
So we're
Okay.
getting, must be fewer and fewer of them in Vermont, right?
It's pretty steady
It is?
each year. Yep.
Because Thomas, they're gone.
Yeah.
And
So
but those little processors,
Mhm.
how do they work?
Some of it's a fluctuation. The biggest challenge for the smallest processors is that they are cash-based, having enough, I would say, reserves to then be able to go to a bank and get those letter of credits. There are some farms that, like, this is very small scale, like one processor, one farmer. They will do like a COD agreement, cash on delivery. So when the farmer drops their milk, they are paid right then and there from that. And those are for very, very small processors that a lot of the times they don't have, because they're cash based, they don't have the equity to be able to obtain a bond or a letter of credit, but they do have the monies to be able to pay right when the milk is delivered. So they're not following the same structure as what you would see in the, you know, of being paid a month later.
And the other issue is, besides, we know how much milk we basically produce in a month, right? And that's what, you know, ballpark.
I don't know off the top of my head. I don't remember. I don't want to give you the wrong number. So I know I presented that to you all earlier
Yeah,
in the session, but
Around, I thought is that 3 billion?
it's something in that ballpark. We projected it to be around like 2.8 this year, but it keeps going down a little bit, but then some there is an uptick, so it's somewhere in that range.
Yeah, and so if the two largest suppliers are not included, do you know how much of our overall product is bonded?
A fair amount of it is, because the cooperatives don't have to have a bond, but who they are selling to has bonds. And so we've run into an issue before where a large processor defaulted. The co-op actually covered the money to the farmers so that they would not miss a month, while legalities were worked out before we actually had to issue the bond. And it was a large amount that went on with that. And so the co-op actually ate that expense until other legal things were settled, and we went ahead and issued the bond to them. So the co-ops don't have to have a bond, but we have seen when bad things have happened that they have put the equity into paying the farmers automatically, so they don't have to wait. And then it turns into a paperwork reviewing for us of who was paid, exactly how much did they ship that was involved in this, and then how much money needs to be issued out of this bond back to it.
But isn't Brattleboro yogurt the only big plant then that?
Well, it's also plants out of state. So processors out of state that are buying from the co-ops, they have to be bonded as well.
Okay. So a processing plant in Massachusetts has to have a bond up here. So that's protecting the co-op, right?
It's protecting the farmers is what it's for. The co-op doesn't have to cover if someone defaults, you know, they could just let the farmers go, but thankfully we've had 2 instances of this. One was able to be resolved, one was not, and the company genuinely defaulted. And in those cases, the co-ops involved chose to pay their farmers in to eat that expense without being paid from the processor, because they didn't want the farmers to go longer without payment. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm just kind of thinking here, in order to be bonded, is it like having money in escrow, actual cash, or is it a credit arrangement with the bonding company that they in essence get, you know, a loan?
Yeah, it can be either. What I usually see is it is a loan. And so in the case where it was, at first the company said, like, we're not going to pay this, like, you can cash the bond. And so when we reached out to their bank and they found out, I guess, whatever the interest was on that, which I'm not privy to, that's their finances, the company decided to pony up and not have that issued. So the argument for I think on the co-op side is that this goes against their credit. Like, it sits there as an expense. And so I think that's why like, our farmers and the co-ops haven't wanted it, because that would be equity they can't invest in and it has to sit there. But for the other processors that are buying from them, it is a requirement.
I don't see how we can require a company in Massachusetts to be bonded for a product up here in Vermont. Do you know anything about that, Steve?
Good morning, Senator. Evie's definitely our expert on this, but as I understand it, it's anybody who has a handler's license in Vermont. So the bonding requirement it applies to a handler, and that includes people who are buying milk from Vermont producers and or Vermont co-ops. So I think the tie is that you're purchasing milk from Vermont. So if you're coming into the state and buying milk, I don't think there's a problem with having a state law that protects the Vermont producers and their co-ops if you default on your payment. So I think that's how we're doing it. I think it's probably perfectly fine to do it that way.
Yeah, we won't issue their milk handler license to be able to buy Vermont milk until this is in place. And so I work a lot with these businesses before our licensing season to make sure that they are getting their finances together for us to review in our office. And they are aware that if they don't submit this, they're not allowed to buy Vermont milk. And we're not the only state that requires this. There's other states that have put this protection in. So I would say from especially the larger out-of-state processors, this isn't unfamiliar to them. It's not a deterrent to purchase Vermont milk.
Is that like an exemption to the interstate commerce?
Should I answer that? Should I try?
If you like.
So it's
You can bring your chair up to the table.
that's okay. Evie knows this so much better than I do, but it's different. And I don't think it triggers the interstate commerce clause because we're not treating in-state and out-of-state people differently. So if we were charging an out-of-state for milk buyer more, that would be a problematic. But to have the same standard,
Okay.
and it's not even a charge, it's really a protection for producers. And you don't even have to get a bond if you pay up front. So you can vitiate the bonding requirement period if you just pay on demand. So I don't think it triggers interstate commerce concerns because it's
So when milk is sold on the spot market, it must be cash up front because you wouldn't be able to keep track of.
And we really don't see that except for the small entities where they have an agreed upon price. So the farmer knows what the price is when they show up. It is exchanged. And so we see that more of like a really small cheesemakers that are buying their neighbor's milk or things like that. For the bigger entities, they're waiting for whatever the federal milk market order price is that comes out and those things and balancing. And so it is more delayed.
Yeah. Well, I'm not too worried about the little guys. I just want to make sure that, you know, I can't figure out why co-op members wouldn't want their co-op to be bonded to protect their own self-interest, you know, in the business. I mean, if, you know, if you're buying half the milk that we produce in Vermont, and that means there's a lot of farms that got 40 odd days of money sitting in the kitty. One of them should decide to dissolve. I don't know where that 41 days times, I mean, some of them guys that ship 3 or 4 tankers a day. I mean, we're talking, you know, serious money. And,
When was the last time that a co-op this was used?
It's not been used with co-ops in my history, at least since this law been enacted, and I've been here since 2017. And the issue, when we've had issues, it has been the actual processor, the buyer of the milk from the co-op. It's not been the co-op.
Yeah, and when was the last time a process?
2.5 years ago. And it was a large amount, and the bond amount that we had was absolutely enough to cover those expenses, so.
So would an individual farmer, this may be the answer to the chair's question, maybe it isn't. There'd be some sort of charge for the individual farmer belonging to co-op to have the co-op be bonded, right?
It would be up to the co-ops to figure that out, but I mean, it would be. an
Somebody's gotta
expense-
pay
It
for
would
it.
be an expense liability for them.
That's how they
Explain.
got exempt in the beginning.
Yeah.
And, you know, when Whiting went bankrupt.
Yeah.
30, 40 years ago. 50. I mean, there was a lot of, yeah, it was before I got here. so-
It was in the late 1960s.
So it, you know, a lot of farms took that back. And
It almost,
we used to have quite a few buyers. And like Hood Company, they always had to be bonded.
And they still are.
And, you know, and the bigger ones all had to be bonded, but the co-ops, well, why are we protecting ourselves? We can handle that, you know? And so we never, well, we did a few years back talk about trying to get them involved in some type of a coverage program, but there's no interest. But I know, dang, I got a good idea what would happen if everything went bust. They'd be calling you or your boss saying, why weren't we bonded, or why weren't we covered? And, you know, I just lost $1 million here. And knowing how our farms, like the young girl that just came in, they're not making any money anyways, and to go 40 odd days with no money. And then by the time you get converted over to whatever, you're done, you know? And so the other, I know you aren't in the maple at all.
It's part of our program within our division, but I don't manage it directly.
Yeah. Steve, are you knowledgeable of maple at all?
Depends on the issue. I know I like it.
Well, that, you know, that has grown really crazy in the last 10 years or 15. And I know when we made maple syrup, the guy from Mass would come and buy it. He would write my dad a check. And then once the check cleared, we would load the syrup on one of the trucks and we take it to Max. And there was quite a few buyers, but they were buying, you know, from 5 barrels to 50 barrels, depending on the size of the operation. And now, you know, a 25 barrel sugar maker is a small sugar maker. And a lot of them are making you know, hundreds, 100 barrels is probably average. And I was just wondering how, if it's still like it used to be when the buyer, the processor buys the syrup, do they write the producer a check or part of the check or any of that? And I mean, those purchases must be pretty big. You know, at $30 a gallon or whatever it is. And the other day we had some maple people in, and you can see that they're getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And like the milk business, we have a lot of producers that have got an awful lot of money tied up in that process. And I was wondering, is there any bonding required for sugar processors so that these people are somewhat protected, or can they buy an insurance, a payment insurance plan of their own? You know, I think we should have that discussion to, you know, we haven't had any sugar makers come in or anything, but just from being here a while and knowing, you know, you've got to look around the corner. You might say, is this something, have you guys thought about this at all or talked about it?
So I've not had any reach out on it. I know that we have bonds for animal health with livestock dealers. And I think that might be the extent of the agency.
I'm not aware of any bonding requirements for maple sugar producers. It's a worthy conversation with the Vermont Sugar Makers Association, I think. This is a pure guess, but just given how short the season is, and that a lot of the transaction is probably made in 1 or 2 installments, I'm guessing. I don't know how much is retained and stored, but I'm guessing people are pretty cautious, like your parents were, about ensuring there's a payment, because if you raise all of your, you grow your whole crop in a month and you're producing that maybe in 1 or 2 times, probably pretty careful about making sure you're going to get paid. So there's either a reputable buyer or you've got that relationship or something, but I don't know. And that's a good question. I haven't heard since I've been here that anybody has defaulted on those payments, but it's always a risk. As far as insurance, I think you can insure just about any risk you want, but the question is whether or not the cost of that insurance is worth it. And I don't know whether a standard business policy would cover failure to pay. I kind of doubt it. But whether or not you can buy a rider to cover that,
Do you have a list of people that do buy maple syrup? Do we know who buys it? Or I mean, if farmer A sells his retail, I'm not so concerned about that, because you've got it at 20 different locations, but it's where you might sell 50 drums, or 100 drums, or 200 drums. I mean, you're talking some pretty serious money. And
I'm not aware of any registration requirement, and in general, we don't have them, for most ag producers. So I don't think it exists, but we certainly have communication with the sugar makers and with the Sugar Makers Association. And I suspect that people in our agency know who the buyers are. Mm-hmm. But I don't believe there's any kind of registration requirement for them. There's compliance requirements, but I don't think there's a distinct registration or licensing requirement. Do you know of any EPs?
I do not.
No. Well, I think, if you have people that meet with the sugar makers, but how many, so you don't know who buys how many people buy syrup in Vermont, right?
No, it's not something we've been tasked with maintaining. Our regulations are more,
Color and
it's
all that.
more of like grade and those things, and it's not necessarily been with market tracking. I'm sure the Maple Sugars Association would probably be able to give you better indication, but there's been line drawings on who's handling what. So,
Well, and it isn't an issue that anybody has brought forward, it's just an issue that I've wondered about for some time and felt that it should be discussed and talked about. And, maybe, do you have somebody that meets with the association?
Tucker Diego is involved, which he testified earlier, I believe, this week. So he works with them, and he's who does like our main audits and whatnot, so.
Well, maybe if they have a meeting, after, now they're probably all busy, but once the season's over, and they meet, or even talk about it amongst yourselves over there to see if that's something that needs chatting about.
Well, if I may, Senator, Dave Mance is a member of the Maple Sugar Association. I think he's on the board, if I'm getting this right. And I think he may have been in here earlier this week, but he's also on the governor's commission on the future of Vermont agriculture. So we meet with him regularly, and one of the proposals in the governor's recommended budget is $10 million to give to grants to develop three different pockets of agriculture, because we think there's an opportunity to really add some infrastructure to help improve the maple sugaring industry in the state. So in that, maybe this is kind of a shared conversation about how do we, if people are supportive of appropriating that money, how do we develop the industry? How do we further it? What protections are in place? And how can we ensure that these investments, if we're going to make them, will benefit the intended farmers and industry and consumers? So I think it's a pertinent area for discussion. And and I know our secretary and others in our agency also meet with sugar makers and attend their functions. I'm not personally involved in it, so.
Yeah.
For the most part.
Is that any,
Yeah, that's fine.
and then, and I know you guys, I know maybe you aren't in on it, but the young lady that was in here prior to you folks works for the Center for Ag Economy over in Hardwood. And she was telling us that she had 7 or 6.
8.
8.
That's what I heard.
Wrote 8 applications for farmers to improve their bulk tank size, so they wouldn't have to do every day pickup. And she said that it was a long process and spent quite a lot of time doing this. And not one of the applicants made it through the process, and who was wondering if it was big. She did say they got a letter back.
Yeah,
right?
I asked her that, yeah.
And that now they're trying to get through the second round. And so I guess it's more for you, Steve. When you talk with the development crew, there's gotta be a reason why not a one of them. You know, can't be too many that filed their,
Part of the issue is this is with the Northeast Dairy Business Innovation Center.
well, or the money we put in the budget last year to help small farmers upgrade so they wouldn't have to do everyday pickup.
Part of it was just the, not enough dollars compared to applications. There was a huge turnout
It would
for
be
it.
helpful if we knew how many applied, how many didn't get accepted, what the field of this out, and you must have that.
Mhm.
Yeah, and maybe what the projected,
Yeah, but they must have had all those people that applied that didn't get accepted. And how much money did they have and what were the grants that they, just a picture of what it is. And if everybody's reapplying, that, yeah, it would give us an idea of what the field of everything that's out there.
Yeah, the other piece of it, and I don't mean to put words in her mouth, so somebody correct me if I'm wrong. Not only were the 8 folks that she worked directly with not accepted, but she said, you know how people talk, and so one farmer talks to another farmer, so there may have even been other farms with which she didn't work that also said, hey, we didn't get it either. We're kind of like wondering. So I think it's more than just the 8 that.
No, it's more than 8 people that didn't get the funding. It was very competitive.
But she didn't know of one that did.
and then I think Laura, didn't they take a bunch of money from Ag Innovation and do some of this work too?
So, Evie, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there was one program that had $200,000 in it that was designed to help the farmers who were
Yes.
dropped by
Yep.
known to transition.
Yes.
So
Yep.
if I remember correctly, just talked to Laura about this recently, I believe every one of those applications was funded.
That's what I understand as well.
And I actually think there was one person who, there was a little bit of money left over. It was almost a perfect, I think there were $199,000 of requests.
Oh,
For a
yeah.
$200,000.
Yeah.
This other program might be federal money and it
Because
might.
that's the DBIC.
And so the federal money, so the DBIC, the Northeast, the Dairy Business Innovation Center, is funded by federal dollars and it's for 11 participating states. And so programs in that umbrella have applicants from all 11 of those states.
Okay.
And so that money is not the money you all appropriated, that's money that the federal government gave to the Northeast Dairy Business Innovation Center. And there's 4 centers, I think, around the country.
Nationally.
And so we have to distribute that money equitably throughout the region. So I'm guessing that the person who was in earlier was talking about one of those applications. But Laura Ginsburg, who's the head of that program, would certainly know what programs we've offered and who applied.
And I believe there's plans to have a similar grant for that done again. So it wasn't just a one and done because of the amount of applicants they had, not just in Vermont, but across that geographic region. So I think that they will be offering that again. So they're aware that there was a huge amount of interest, but they only get a certain amount of dollars that they can put out for certain grants that have to be approved by USDA, but it was a lot of interest.
Yeah, well, that everyday pickup, with the cost of trucking
Yep.
and moving product. When you hook the hose up, you may as well fill the truck and have to run to 15 places every day. So, any other questions for me? So will you
I
check?
had one comment on the bonds, just an oddity is that the bond amount for cattle or sheep is different than goats. And I'm not sure why, but goats are half the dollar amount. And I don't know why that is in statute, because their milk is more expensive to produce than cows, but it is an oddity that they have a different dollar amount calculating wise than cattle or sheep. So I don't
They
know.
produce half as much?
Well, the issue is it's supposed to cover not the pounds produced, but the dollar amount. And so their dollar amount is significantly higher in production, but I think goats, they produce, nowhere near remotely per animal compared to cows, but the dollar amount for the hundredweight is significantly higher. So that's just an oddity when I am working with other staff or trying to explain this to them, and they're like, well, why is the goat amount less? Like, why is it not dollar for dollar like it is with cattle? And I just say that's what's in statute. So
I don't even.
We can fix
Must be a reason.
recall setting that up or working on it.
don't know if it was other people involved when it was written, that wanted it that way, or from others from industry, but,
How old is the statute?
oh goodness.
It's gotta be all.
I'm not certain. I'm guessing, this is purely a guess, that it might have been a goat processor request at the time, just
Yeah.
because they are smaller processors, smaller resources, and maybe they couldn't, their
Afford them.
argument at least was they couldn't afford it. Whether or not that was true then or now, I have no idea, but that's my guess is that.
Well, if Bobby doesn't remember it, it's gotta be more than last year.
Your words, not mine.
He's got a very good memory.
Yes, he
He's
does.
remembering back to the 60s.
So that is one random, it's in
Well,
statute,
look
and
at
it's not dollar for dollar, and so it's something that's always concerned me, because I don't know if something happened with the goat producers, if it would actually be enough money calculated to cover their losses, and that's my concern. So,
Yeah. Okay, any other questions?
No, thank you very much, Evie.
thank y'all for your
How
time,
things going, good or bad?
plucking along. I have a skewed perspective, being dairy my focus, so,
Yeah.
but, no.
Thank you.
Our production's down a little bit.
And I would just say some interesting trends we're seeing. We're still seeing farms, if they go out, a lot of those herds are staying in Vermont because the base is traveling with the herd, potentially with some of the co-ops. So,
Yeah, still doing that.
one co-op does, one co-op does not.
Oh,
So that's always confusing. And I'm not seeing as many organic farms going out, but the ones that we do see going out, they are not losing, they are retaining their membership and I guess I would say their base. So instead of them being closed, they are on a temporary stop. They're selling their herd, but they're maintaining their membership with their shipper. And I think that is in hopes for some of this organic market to weather the storm. They're cutting their expenses, and then they're keeping their heifers to then build back up, and hopefully when the market is better. So I'm seeing a lot that come through that they are selling their herd, the organics, but maintaining their membership. So I think it's their way of trying to weather this storm that is very difficult. Laura Ginsburg and I were at a conference the past 2 days in New York, and there's very similar issues there in the organic market as well. And so this is genuinely a national issue. It's not just a Vermont issue. So it is of concern.
One thing that maybe would be good if you feel that, I think it's something you ought to look into, is I send to one of these buyers that pays 90%. And the other 10 they won't take because it's over the quota base. And the issue is what happens to the other 10%? Because I don't really, I'm a producer, and I'll blend the 10% in with my 90%, and it still gives me a price that I can work with. But how does the farmer know what he's getting, or what that other 10% that's waste milk? If it's sold for $5 100, $20 100, or 15, what it's sold for. So how do they double check what they're getting for a price on that 10% that they're sending in that it's outside the federal order or outside the accepted amount. Because I had one farmer say, you know, I haven't got a clue. I didn't know what I get for it, but I don't have a clue where it went, what it went for, or anything. And, you know, maybe you could ask, I don't know who the heck to even ask.
It would definitely be, I would say, the cooperatives. What the farmer is seeing on their milk check, because it's based on the base that the different co-ops have come up with, they are getting a dollar amount on pounds, and it shows for what was in the range they're fine with. And if they go over the base, they get a different dollar amount. But to my knowledge, what the co-op's doing with that milk, whether if they skimmed it and they dumped the skim milk and kept the solids or other things, or they sold it, like that dollar amount, I don't believe is being passed on to the farmer. And that's not something that's reported to us. And so what the farmer is seeing is just whatever the policy is on the base with their co-op. Here's the amount that was at the 90 that you met your total. Here's the full amount you're getting, and then here's the reduced amount for going over that. So, to my knowledge, that's the communication they're getting. You'd have to ask one of the cooperatives with that. Our office
Yeah, but
does.
I should think the ag agency would be a little bit interested in what's happening to the other 10%.
Well, we know where the milk is going. We get monthly reports on their pounds. And so we do get that information, but we are not given dollar amounts. And I doubt the co-ops would want to share that with us.
No,
So,
that's not what I'm getting at. What I'm getting at is you could take that extra 10%, run it through the process, skim out the skim, and take the other, whatever's left, make it in ice cream mix and sell it to Ben and Jerry's. Or you could end up doing the same process and selling the leftover to make cheese in, which is now cheese is high, but as a rule, class 4s used to be pretty low. And class 1 is usually used to be the highest. So there's a lot of dollars that nobody knows where or what's happening to it, other than 10% X dollars. Yeah, because our farmers and this lady that was just in here before you, I don't think she had one farmer that was showing, you know, profit. Well, you know, every dollar counts, and if they can't figure it out, looking at their checks, and we aren't knowledgeable enough to figure it out. Seems like you folks that are supposed to be knowledgeable in the industry and looking after it could ask the hard questions, and because we could ask them, but how do we know we're getting the right answer? But anyway, something to think about. Thank you, Evie.
thank you so much for your time.
And you're staying with us, right? Steve?
Yes.
Yeah. We'll take a little break here and 10 minutes.